All right, that sounds better.
Yeah, nice.
Okay, you're on.
Okay, so if you want to start the slide show, the picture show.
There we go. Can you see that, Bruce?
Yeah, it's great.
So I'll go through these slides, and a lot of these pieces I have here today.
Yep, I got it.
And some of the pictures in here, I show some of the processes of how I do some of these things. So, is that automatically going?
Nope.
Okay. So this is a small little maple vessel that I actually turned in a class that Greg Gallegos taught in the Kalamazoo Club. I came back with it, and the black material that I've used there is actually VHS recording tape that I modify into cord, if you will, and just some beads. And this is actually weaving, so cords going in and out of each other. Next slide. This is actually coiling, and this is a piece that was sassafras, made a winged bowl. I didn't really know what to do with it, so I just started playing with this. It's pine needles and the VHS tape again. And that followed the contour of the shape, and that's kind of what dictated how that ended up. Question? Yes, I do a little of both. I play with pieces. I'm sorry, the question was, do I sketch to try to get an idea of what I want to make? And I do sketch, but I also just pick up pieces and play with them and play with the shapes and see how they interact, that type of thing. So next slide. This is a piece, and I titled it Dientis, which is Latin for from within. If you can see the top view, there is the coil goes all the way to the bottom. I use aluminum armature wire to get that to, be firm enough to manage that. This was a piece that I was going to, I believe this, I was going to submit this to the Regional Arts Competition in 2019. Are we getting feedback from someone else, or? Okay. Well, if they have the question, yeah. Yeah. So this was only about 4x4. It was for the competition of a piece that was in a 4x4x4 space. That's pine. That was just like where the branches come out, and I left a little of the bark on there. Next slide. So this is actually a piece, it's similar to Greg Gallegos's, podlets, where you cut it thin, and I took 3 of these pieces, kind of put a foot on each one of them, and just strapped them together with sinew, and used beads to, embellish it. You can see kind of the light shining through on the top picture, so that's pretty thin. I also used candle soot to color the bottom side of this, and after that I applied a little oil finish, I believe, just to make sure that wasn't going to come off in your hands, as you hold it. I've been exploring a lot of different things with this idea, and sketching a lot, as Jeff asked about. Next slide. This is a piece that I brought today. I should go back and say that pine needle coiling has been around for hundreds of years. Native Americans did this practice. Longleaf pine needles are generally used, and those are, the East Coast, the southern East Coast, and the West Coast has longleaf pine needles. With this piece, I utilized an antler to kind of make a handled basket. The bottom of the piece is cherry. It's up here if you want to look at that a little closer. Next slide. This is a piece that I bought this piece of Norfolk Island pine from Ron's Retreat 3 years ago. And I utilized I cut the two pieces, and the center section is pine needle coiling. I'll show a little later on how I do that technique, but this was the first piece that I sold at a gallery, and I was kind of pretty proud about that. So first red dot, as it says up there. We lost that picture again. So there's a couple of vessels. These I donated to the 2002 New City Kids Gala that Tom promoted. Tom Penninga promoted a couple years ago. They were a bit of a prototype, but I thought they were good enough to, submit. So, but the two-piece cherry, and these are kind of juxtaposed. That's the one up here, and I can put that on this right here. So that has basically two natural edge bowl shapes turned 90 degrees to each other to get that orientation. I mean, we can see it there. I don't know if there's a way to turn that on, but I do have a little bit more, some more pictures about this later on. Kind of show that, but you kind of get the idea, we go to the next slide. So this is very similar to the Norfolk Island pine piece. These pieces it's one piece. You start with one piece, you cut it into two, and you fill in the center section with the coiling. The piece on the left-hand side is one where I ended up not quite matching the top circle with the pine needles. So I ended up with a little bunching. And so I used that bead to kind of cover up that mistake. I think that's up here as well. So this is actually a piece that is a collaboration. Ron Campbell, I asked Ron if I could borrow one of his mindless turnings. And I basically coiled from the bottom and reached around. This isn't attached to the piece at all, but it sets in there, kind of just nestles in there. And here there's several. I've been exploring. Greg Galagos does podlets, and you try to do that, but you don't want to just sort of copy what he does. So you come up with something a little different. So. That piece, it's difficult to have a piece that stays like this because pine needles are brittle. If someone were to display that, you'd want them to keep it in a place where the cat couldn't knock it off the shelf or kids couldn't play with it, that kind of thing. But next slide. This is actually the piece that I submitted this year to a regional arts competition, and it won the Ron Denbroder Memorial Woodturning Award this year. It's out there in Grand Rapids somewhere. I'm not sure exactly. I think it's in the Grandma Museum. Next slide. This is a class that I taught at Ron's retreat. Tom is from our club here, a couple other members from around the states. Tom did bring in his piece, so I could kind of show that. There's not a lot of time. The coiling takes quite a bit of time. If we can get a shot of that. So in our class, we had enough time to basically run around the rim. And this is some process, basically. The top right picture would be me turning the top of this section. Let's say the bottom right picture shows already the bottom section attached to the coiling. And on the right-hand side of that picture is the form that's used to train the coils, to get to the right diameter when you reach the top. The middle lower section shows that form in there, as well as the left-hand side, and then the top center picture shows. I don't leave the form in there when I put the top on.
So you leave that form in there while you're weaving around it, and it helps keep it round?
You will do 3 or 4 coils, then put the form in to shape it, and then take that out. It's difficult to use, to put the needle through with the form in. So,
Okay.
Next picture. So that's the end result, and then I brought that one up here to show as well. So once again, that's VHS tape. These are pine needles. Yeah. Next slide. So this is kind of, I've kind of refined this process down to the point where it allows me to attach the pine needles easier and also finish the top easier. You can see here, and I do have these, but let's go to the next picture. So this is a sketch that I've drawn. And it kind of shows the relationship of the top and bottom piece. The bottom and top piece are made from one piece of wood. And I turn that and part it off. I put flanges on both of those pieces, and I get the relationship of the diameters from this drawing. I vary, it's kind of a guideline, and then I'll vary the different shapes to whatever piece might be that I'm working on, depending on what it is. The one on the right-hand side had a lot of wormholes in it, and it got foreshortened because there wasn't anything left to hold the chuck on. So it's foreshortened, and I thought, well, it kind of messes up the dimensions of it, but it's interesting enough to have those beads actually going in and out of, and so that's how that one ended up. If you can kind of see, there's a couple of lines. There's a line going diagonally, let's say, from the top of the piece into the top coil, and that's my needle direction. So when I put the top section on, I literally come in from the top with a long 4 or 5 inch needle called a dowel needle for sewing dowel's heads on, and that's how that process is completed. The section in the middle, as we showed, I think we go to the next slide, we'll see a form. Oh, I'm sorry, could we back up to one more? You see the section on the picture on the bottom has the form in the middle. So that takes up that space in that sketch or that drawing. So going forward. And these are variations on what I had done. I talked about this one on the right-hand side where when I got done, the coiling was a little bit larger diameter than the top section. So you start from one place on the diameter, by the time you get around, it's bunched up, so if you picked up that piece, you could see that. So I put that bead on there, and then I actually took a ring of the VHS material just to kind of hide how that bead was stitched on, so the one on the left-hand side, I've been working with for several years now. I turned that top section with the branches coming out of it, which is kind of difficult, on the lathe, but it's so narrow, the diameter is so narrow, I couldn't use pine needles. They would just break because I'm too tight of a radius. So I used, at one point in time, rope, and it was a lot taller. I think there's a sketch or there's a drawing in here that shows that, and it was very pliable, so I could take that and actually rotate it, and I didn't like that. So what this ended up being was aluminum armature wire that I just wrapped and tied together. I still can't actually attach that with cord or with sinew because of the tightness of everything. So I have that piece here, and it's still not assembled, but it's tight enough where it actually sits on. Next slide. So this is the piece we were looking at a few minutes ago. Let's go to the next slide. And these three pictures here show I basically made two bowls, natural edge bowls, and you know, if you had the log coming through on the top section, it would be this way, and then on the bottom section, the log is coming this way, and you just turn those 90 degrees and fill it in with the coiling. I also have sketches where I've sketched something like this where I kept them in line, so you end up with large openings on front and back, and you could fill that in with beads or coiling in a different way, little medallions that you might make out of burls or something like that, which you'd basically be making a bead out of. So I have a lot of ideas that this prototype has kind of, you know, allowed me to sketch and make variations on. So hopefully in the future, I'll be able to come up with some cool stuff there. Next slide. So this one is, I believe these are mulberry branches. We had the the power company come through and clean out our power line. I had a lot of small trees that I had to have something to do with. The coiling on this one is actually started at the top and then coiled to a oh, there it is. It coiled opposite of what I would do if I started the other bowls. If we could get a picture of, that. So this actually was the beginning of the coil, and I go in the opposite direction until I get a diameter big enough to mold it to the shape of the natural edge bowl. They go back to the slide. Oh, backwards. So you can see in the top left-hand section, I still have the bark on that particular one, and I basically included the needles sort of inside the top of the bowl as opposed to being on the edge of the bowl. And all I needed to do was just go a little farther with the coil to make it sit on top, but I wanted to, since the bark was still there, I used the bark. One nice thing about, you know, using a natural edge bowl, if you have one that you turn the bark flies off of, take it all off, and you can use this method, you know, and you know, kind of replaces the bark in that situation. Next slide. So this was the kind of the evolution. Here I've got a sketch on the left-hand side of something that I was thinking about one day. On the far right side is where I talked about using the plastic rope basically to coil around there, and you know, it was just so flexible. It just wasn't going to work. And the base of this is, I think it's only like an inch to an inch and a half around, so it's kind of a narrow piece. And it was quite a bit taller as well. And then the middle section, I think I took about 2 inches out of that. And next slide. This is an evolution too. The piece that I made in Greg Galagos's class, I originally just used pine needles from our Christmas tree. You know, I just went over and grabbed a few. It's a conifer Christmas tree that we had at the time. And I just sort of weaved them in there, and it kind of looked okay. And then the needles dried out, and it wasn't any good, you know. So I just evolved that into the piece that is in the top right-hand corner. And I think this might be my last slide. So this gets back to, you know, some of the sketches that I sketch, and I've said this before, I have a sketchbook by my bed. When I wake up in the middle of the night, I'll have an idea, I'll sketch, you know. So I also, this one in the top corner, this is actually our church bulletin, and I've got probably hundreds of church bulletins with sketches, you know, so at any rate, I think that's the last of the slides. Yeah. So I can talk a little bit about, I'm not sure where the best way to get to the tabletop here. All right, so I can kind of see that picture there.
Where did you get the idea to start doing this?
That's a good question. And if the Zoom people didn't hear, Terry asked me where did I get the idea for this. And the best I can think of is high school art class, because I did a little bit of that, you know, in art class. Actually turned in high school as well, you know, and you know, didn't do any turning after high school until about 6 years ago, or I'm sorry, 8 years ago. And then the pine needle stuff, I must have seen it somewhere, but I also, you know, did coiling in high school, not with pine needles, but with other materials. And the idea of coming up with using the VHS tape is probably the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks. So if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. So you can use any kind of material, you know, you want to use. I'm going to show some of the pine needles here. And the pine needles, when you do them, are they before just dry, or you can get processed pine needles. Now, I came across most of my pine needles in an estate sale, and the person that was selling them had, you know, that had been using them had about 4 totes of material, you know, so I came across quite a few. Otherwise, you'd have to go online basically to buy these, you know, and they can process them. The best ones are the long leaf pine needles, and they process them with glycerin, and that makes them somewhat shiny. It also makes them pliable. And once they're processed that way, you don't really have to do much with them except keep them dry, you know. So you wouldn't want to use pine needles right off the tree. You'd want to clean them. So you make sure there's, you know, any of the sap, any of the mold or anything like that is gone, and you basically just clean them in a soap solution. And also, depending on what I'm using, you know, if I can bend it like that, I'm not too concerned. I'm not too concerned about them cracking. But if I have some that are more brittle and I want to use them in a piece, I'll actually soak them in warm water before I use them. A little bit, yep. It doesn't take much because they're so thin, you know. So, let's see. So if I'm coiling, try to get a good example here. If I'm coiling a basket like this, where I don't have caps, then I'm basically cutting the caps off of the pine needles. But sometimes you'll want to use the caps in a piece, like on this one.
Hey, what do you mean by caps?
The caps of the pine needle, let's see if I can get a good shot somewhere here. You can see these pine needles have caps on them.
Like the ends where it was on the
Yeah.
left.
Main camera, he's holding in front of that one.
There you go. So on this piece, I actually embellished the caps with a cotton thread. So I've turned those yellow. So pine needles will come in different types of pine needles. Will have either 3 or 5 pine needles coming off one cap. But you can use those caps as, basically, it's kind of like using it as a bead. Okay, so these are ones with caps. No, wrong. There we go.
Good.
Yep. And these are, just straight needles with the caps removed. They obviously use needles. Tapestry needles seem to be the best ones for just straight cutting. When I use VHS tape, I can kind of make a fake needle with a cap if I'm looking to do so with something like that. I don't know if you can see that or not, where that's going here. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, that's good.
So that's the VHS tape, basically making a fake needle. It works the same when I'm doing the coiling. It doesn't really. I could probably do a half hour on how I do that. I did bring some things to show here. I basically spin it. This is a Scottish drop spindle that I use. So I'll hook it up and I'll just spin it, and it puts a twist on it, and then I'll pull it, and that gives it a set, and then I end up with material that looks like that. What's that? Oh, sorry. So, and I can use that. I've used it for the coiling around material and the threading material that captures the coils. You can use it kind of either way. This is artificial sinew. It's a waxed synthetic cord. You generally would split this in half to use, and that's what you see on that piece. Wax helps to be able to, as you're coiling, you want to make sure things are tight, and the wax helps it to keep tight while you're coiling. How do I cut it? I just use a pair of scissors like this. So I use these quite often.
What was the question? How do you cut that?
How do I cut the VHS tape? With the VHS tape, there's another method I use, and it depends on the quality of the tape that you have. And I've tried to figure out if one brand is better than another. Even to the point where I thought, well, Disney probably uses really high quality tape, and so I'd go to all the VHS tapes of my wife's Disney movies that she replaced with DVDs, and then Blu-ray. So we have all the movies on all the media. But anyway, if you pull it, you can also, if the quality is good enough. I don't know if we can be able to see this very well. There we go. And I got that line in there. But if I just pull it, it'll get a pretty flat side, and it'll curl it. If I were to take a cut through here and show it in a magnifying glass, it would look a lot like a pine needle, because a pine needle has a flat side and a curled side. And if you can get the right quality of this stuff, you can actually use that just like a pine needle. Where I spin it like that, it almost gives a diamond shaped or diamond faceted quality to it, as you can kind of see that. So, and like I say, I could go on and on about this stuff, but if you don't have a good quality, the actual magnetic material will come off the plastic, and it'll look like a gray ghost kind of thing. It'll also come off on your hands, and as you're coiling, it'll come off on the cord, so it makes it very muddy. Doesn't work very well. so. You pull it, yeah, and if it pulls and the material comes off, it's, you're gonna have to do the spin method, the spinning method, so you're not really pulling that material off anymore. You're pulling a little bit just to give it a set, but, so this piece was, like I say, I think this is only about 1 inch in diameter at the bottom. It's tight enough, I have these holes drilled into here. See those? You can see the holes in there, but I can't get a needle in there, to attach it. I had to make this section, in air. Normally I'm starting at this point and coiling around, but it's just too small of a diameter to be able to do that. So I finally used the aluminum wire and just wrapped the whole thing. And now I've got that section, and I can squeeze that on there. Maybe I use some E6000 or something to glue it together. I don't know, but it's still an evolutionary stage, but someday it'll be done. I can't really, I didn't do these holes in the direction where I could come in with a needle in here. And it's also so steep, I just can't get in with that. So things you learn. I do, I have curved needles, but I can't hook it into that. So I want to kind of go back to the history a little bit too. This is actually a gourd, a Calabash Gourd, and they would use, this has basically a cord that they've used there. But it's, this is basically where this came from. If they, you could do pine needles off of a gourd, they would decorate the gourd. This is something I found at a garage sale for $1, I think. But I always want to bring it just to kind of say, I didn't invent this. It's been around for hundreds of years. Let's see. Any kind of, you can go as expensive or as inexpensive as you like. I'm kind of cheap. That's why the VHS tape is free, so. But I picked up some cotton waxed cord, from Hobby Lobby, which, you can spend as much as you want, and get it to look as good as you want. Or you can also use wire, to coil with. This guy right here I've been using forever, and this is kind of gives you some form. So if you wanted to branch out with a, this section right here has got some wire in it to give it some stability. I like this this cotton. I think it's cotton. This cord, I can't remember where I found these, but I like to use that quite a bit. It works very well. You can use, this is basically embroidery thread.
Crochet cut.
Well,
Crochet cut.
you think so? Because it's got plies to it. Yeah, okay. Well, I've also seen it like embroidery thread. This doesn't have wax, but you can use your own wax to apply to it. And the wax just helps things, tighten up, stay tight when you're coiling. Okay, so I think I'm down to some of the tools. This is jewelry pliers that I like to use. I can push the needle, you can use a thimble, but I can push the needle if I put it in the crook of this. Sometimes it's a little tough getting it in through there. You pull the needle out from the other side. In our class at Ron's, I had everyone drill holes around the perimeter because it was easier to do, but I actually like to burn holes. And then I'll use a propane torch to heat up a nail. And I'll end up with holes that are a little cleaner. You don't get the chipping with that you do from a drill point.
So you heat the needle, but just pierce the hole, right?
Yes. Because these,
Needle like red hot?
Yeah, yeah, it is. So, it has to be, you want a small enough hole where basically what you want to be able to do is pass the needle and the thread through and not be any bigger than that, because you'll just get, you'll get kind of these large holes, and you can kind of see light through them, which is okay if that's what you want. But I try to, I try not to. When I do it with the Burnham, I don't get any of the burrs from the drill. I do get a little soot on there. I got to clean that up, and what I'll do is actually run a waste piece of thread through each one of those holes to make sure there's no soot on there. But I like that better. It also gives you a grab another piece over here. I don't know which camera we want to do, a close-up camera. Okay. So you can kind of see it gives a more finished look, in my opinion. This one I didn't do with that way, but what I did on this one was kind of alternate the height of the holes, just to give a pattern to the lace that I put on there. So I think this is mulberry. I did a little Greg Galagos. I mentioned his name a lot. I like to do some of the things that he does, but this was turned wet, and it's allowed to distort. I purposely ran the pith through here to get that to move a lot. And he also does something what he calls faulting, which he emphasizes the spalting lines with a pen, an archival pen. And this is a little different, where I'm actually just trying to capture the different colors of the grain. So I'm not really introducing spalting, just capturing different colors, just emphasizing them. So I do that quite a bit. Yeah.
That little one you got there, just for everybody to understand, how many hours roughly would you have into a wee piece like that?
Well, to turn something like that, okay, Jeff asked how many hours would I have into a piece about this size? And, I haven't really thought about that, but to turn something like that, it's not very long. I have a tendency to do small pieces because I have a short attention span. So I'll do pieces like this. Like I say, I like to have them move. The rim is natural edge, so that was whatever that was on the branch coming in this direction. And I think that probably maybe took, an hour to turn and sand, so I also take a trip to the microwave to get it to distort, and do a little bit of that. Drilling the holes, doesn't take very long. And, it was only one set of needles, which was all done at one time. So it's probably a 3-hour thing, maybe, something like that.
So do you bundle the needles and then attach them, or do you bundle and attach at the same time?
In this case, I started with a bundle. There's a little bead. Let's see if we can find that bead in there. Oh, there we go. I don't have any light to show. Okay, see that bead right there. That's where I started. And in this case, I had these just stacked and then looped it all the way around. You got to pretty much try to keep them in line. It's kind of your goal to do that. So that one, it didn't take very long to do that. Something like this is probably 12 hours of coiling. Yeah, so I had planned on getting this piece completely done and ready to attach to something about this size. And I started on that Monday. I worked 2 hours, pretty much 2 hours a night on it. And that's as far as I got, so. Takes a little while. Yes. Okay, it's actually, that straw, I'm sorry, Tom asked about how I use a straw or a gauge to keep the needles, the coil the same size as you're going around. So this is just a soft drink straw right there. And you can use different size gauges to make the coils bigger or smaller. It would be a,
You slide the straw up as you use it.
yeah. So, I mean, I can show that here in a minute. I thought I got this set up so I can do a little bit of that when we get through, darn it. There we go. Get that out of the way. Yeah, so I'll do a little bit of coiling on that piece here in a second. How are you on time? Okay. All right. Yeah, so that's the straw. I use bigger gauges. A good turning project would be to make different size gauges, like almost like a pen blank or something like that. I keep thinking I'll do that and I haven't done it yet. So coiling a basket, a large basket, it's just like anything else. When you're doing something large enough and you've got a shape like, a sort of, I want to say kind of a classic shape, as you're going from smaller to larger, in theory, those coils should be getting larger as you're going up and coming back down again. It's kind of the golden rule kind of thing. It should be following that. If you look at baskets that are handmade, quite a few of them, good ones, are done that way. It's difficult to do something like that in the small sense here, but. How do you weave your needles together there to make it long? I guess I can. Yeah. The question was how do you weave the needles together? So you are loading this straw about every other time you go in with your needle into the part. So let me clear this up just a little bit so I can, and then we'll get a good shot of what I'm doing. Binder clips are also very useful. Your hands get cramped after a little while of doing this. Okay. I misplaced my tapestry needle. There we go. That is another. Wow. There we go. Okay, you almost need like 3 hands when you do this kind of thing. I've got this started. Okay, oh, sorry, that's good. Okay. So let me know if I'm out of out of the picture. But so my gauge is loose, so I want to load some needles. You take the unpointy end, so the end that actually was attached to the cap, and you load that in. You're trying to get that into the center of that mass. Sometimes it's not always possible, but what that does is helps you to keep the ends hidden inside the coil. And you can kind of see I've got one sticking up right there already, but the idea is to keep them in the center of that mass. So Now I'm going to stitch, and so it's difficult to me to see, but I'm going to try to show you where I'm coming through. I'm poking through about half of the needles on the right-hand side of the cord, the next cord that's up there, and I'm trying to poke out so that I'm on the opposite side of the cord as I'm coming through. What that does is gives me a nice spiral effect as I'm going around. There's lots of stitches that you can do with this. So then I'd be coming around again. I'm kind of loose, so I want to throw some more in here. That's kind of funny because I usually do this while the TV's on, so, you know. And I do go a little faster than this when I'm doing it, you know, at home, not in front of everyone. So you have to keep your hand tight against the thing to make sure that it's tight as you're coming around. You kind of want to keep things going. And you just keep going in this fashion until you get a row. And what I'm trying to do right now is start to flare this out more. I've had this curve coming down this way, but I want to start to make a disc, if you will, so that eventually I'll be able to manipulate that to attach to this natural edge bowl shape. That was what I was going for. But I could also do something where I've got a base that's just a cup like this, and I'm just continuing on with the top part of the base. You know, this is kind of where I was talking about picking up something and just playing with the ideas about, you know, what to do. So I could probably, you know, continue on doing it, but I think you get the idea of the coiling there. So just keep loading. You do a couple. You make sure this stays kind of tight.
You have in your mind the shape that you're trying to achieve. You're trying to do that.
Yes. Yes, the question was, I have that, I'd shape the idea of the shape in my mind as I'm trying to form this, and that's true. So, and there are, you know, you have to sort of change the angle of where the needle's going in to get that to start to flatten out and flare out. I think the other thing I was gonna do was, I did want to talk about these because I plan on doing, you know, quite a few of these. I really did want to have one that was kind of ready to go. Let me grab one that I've already done. Oh, I got one right here. I've got it. Thank you. Since I have this one here, I will kind of show if I've got a good, here we go. Kind of see maybe where this is. I started here, I came around, it's all nice and tight to the piece until I get to that right spot right there where it kind of puckered out. So that's hiding all that. So one of the reasons I started doing some of this was to hide how bad I didn't finish the inside of my pieces. Yeah. So you can't really see that, you know, in there. You can't, you know, so.
How many hours did you spend hiding that?
Yeah. I should have just, in other words, I should have just threw it away. Yeah. So on these forms, you know, I turned these, you know, this was out of one piece of wood. And somewhere there are marks on here that lined them up. Find my, this piece. But, then I can go back and match the grain, and that's kind of important for me to do that before I attach that top piece, is make sure that those at least kind of make a story there, stay in tune with that. So on this one, and I was going to demonstrate on those types of pieces, the long needles. These are, once again, these are dowel needles. I'm kind of looking in, and I don't know, let's see, kind of looking in the top of this and shooting for the hole. And on that sketch, I kind of intentionally designed it so I could have a clear shot to that hole. And I'll actually come out. Whoop. Yeah. It's that easy. Yeah, sometimes I actually have, I may be actually looking at that wormhole. Sometimes I'll get my camera out to find out where I'm going through. There we go. I don't know if we can see that. It's dark inside there, but I've hit that hole, and I'll end up coming through. I've got all of this done, and I'll end up coming through. It's pretty tight. There we go. So I'll come out here, and then I'll bring it completely out, and I'll go right back through that hole again, or not through the same hole, but I'll go underneath that, so I've got something to capture, come out, and then go back in, come out, so that's how I finish the top of those off. All right, so maybe if I take this was also, just something that I turned it, it kind of warped, which is what I was going for, but this one cracked, and I could toss it, or I could just, play with it. A lot of these are like, I can't go wrong if I just play with it, what I want to do with it. I try to shoot for equal spacing, so there's ways you can do that pretty easily. You could actually measure that diameter and figure that out, depending on how many holes you want in there. There's ways to calculate that. I'll use a pair of calipers, and sometimes I'll take just a light, I'll just put a gap in here. It would be a shorter gap. I'll just do that here. And I'll just do a very light line around the top if I want them all in one row. And then I'll just, pick a gap that looks good to me, and I'll work around that all the way around until I get to the end and see how close I am. Usually you're close enough, so that's how I judge those. If I'm doing a piece like this, I want to make sure I got the same number of holes. It's not real important, but sometimes you might actually end up, if you're doing pine needles with caps, and you're doing a better job than I did with this one at making them spiral, you might end up that it's important that this actually hits a hole up here, because if I'm like sort of in the middle, I'm pointing here, no one can see. If I'm sort of in the middle by the time I get to here, then I've got to make an adjustment somehow. If you're doing a piece that you are actually weaving, you need to know, that pattern's going to work out. You just draw it on, sketch it out. Similar to this one, I had, this is a piece of sycamore, and it just had a, pentagon shape inside there. Just took some beads and finished it off. Just kind of sits on the counter there. All right, so I think I'm just gonna take a few of these capped ones and start this process here a little bit and just go around the rim. Shouldn't take very long. I want to get that out of the way. Just put it on it. When I use the wax sinew for something where I'm just doing a round a rim type of thing, I will use the whole thread. If I was doing coiling, I would split it sometimes in threes to get a thinner wrap. I don't think I have beads here, so I'll just try to knot this. So the thing I mentioned about doing things to hide the insides of bowls, I also hide my coiling mistakes on the insides of the bowls. If you were coiling a nice piece, you would want that to be looking good from both sides. So you're doing this, you look around to make sure you've got the patterns working on both sides. And then kind of what I'm doing here, I kind of hide all of that stuff, so. So these have caps. These caps are kind of fuzzy. That's why sometimes I'll cap them with another, cloth or whatever. Take a couple. And I'm just going around. This is almost too tight right here. And I think I'll just, I started with 2 because you want to have some mass when you start, but you're going to be adding more mass as you're going along. So I'll just start adding 1 every time.
One needle is folded in half.
It's capped, so it has 3 needles coming out of it. 3 needles connected to the cap. And I'm skipping every other hole to add a needle. The nice thing about the artificial sinew is it does not really ever wind up. If you're using this stuff, it'll wind, and as you're pulling it, it'll want to knot real easily. I may have missed one here. I didn't go all the way through there. All right, we're going to skip it. That's too big for that. This never happens at home. It happens about every 5 minutes, actually. Okay. So you can see it probably would take me about another maybe 5-10 minutes to finish this off. Maybe. All right, let me slow down here. So that coming around. This might be the point in my demo where you start talking about watching paint dry, right?
Good time for questions.
Yeah, so it would be a good time. Yeah, I mean, you can use,
The question was, do you use any other materials besides pine needles?
thank you.
The answer is,
You can use anything you can think of. There's something called muley grass, which is used in baskets. I mean, like I said, I use the VHS tape. You know, I could put one of those in. So this is VHS tape, and I've just put a cap on it. You know. So I could throw that in there if I wanted to. Could use all of those. That's basically, you know, what that was done with. You can use, you know, they make baskets out of blackberry brambles, you know, they make baskets out of a lot of things. I'm trying to think of, I think it's sweetgrass is what I'm thinking of, is another very good one. And that's very long, so you're not loading as much with these pine needles. So, you know, I might get to the point where I get around here, and I would probably do the same thing I did on that one right there, just have the points of the needles hanging out in space. Sometimes if you know it's going to go somewhere where there might be somebody messing with it, I might just cut them off at an angle short so that they're not going to, you know, get damaged if they do get damaged. You know, some of these were short and broken off already. You know, I didn't do anything with those, but if I was going to give that to somebody, I would probably just take a long pair of scissors and just cut it at a taper. So it still does a little bit of that. But anyway.
When you use beads, do you sew them in as you are
Yeah.
making the coil?
Yes, yeah. I mean, you could go in after the fact and apply beads, you know, maybe with a hook needle or something like that. So if you got done with something and said, you know, it really needs a few beads, you can do that. But some of like this one, these were actually done with the bead actually replacing this part right here. So I put the bead on and I halved those over, you know, doubled it over, I guess you'd say. And that was the bead for that guy there. As I was doing this, these beads reminded me of, I think they're like a fishing lure. I think they call them poppers or something like that. It reminded me of the eyes on those fishing lures. But so I don't know, how are we on time?
we're probably about time to wrap it up.
Okay.
Any more questions? If you do a larger bowl, how do you keep the dimensions is the question.
If you know, you can use the form method the same way that I use that form right here. You know, if you really wanted to, you know, make sure that you're mating up with some part, that's the way I would approach that.
I got a question.
Oh, there's a question online too.
So before, he asked if I would change the size of my wrap on a larger bowl. I would think of it. I haven't done very large pieces yet, but I would start to think about how I would want to gauge that. So as I start out, I might use the soda straw, and then I might, you know, get bigger and bigger. And if it's coming back on itself, then I would think about reducing the size of that. coming back.
We have an online question?
Yeah, I'm wondering where you get the turntable from.
The turntable? Is that Charlie?
Pardon?
Is that Charlie?
I didn't understand you.
No, it's Larry Truss.
You can get those turntables on Amazon.
Ask Jeff Brill.
Don't get the one with the mirror finish. They don't hold up very well. Yeah,
Don't get the one with what?
the mirror top. If it's got the mirror top, it just don't. I don't care how well you keep care of it, it gets all scratched.
If you can get a variable speed, it's nice.
Yeah.
I did want to talk about this piece. It's got a sort of a sentimental value to me. It is based on a Lakota medicine wheel, and I did a lot of mission work out in South Dakota with Lakota Indians, and it's actually a Grand Rapids-based organization called Remember that goes out there and helps build bunk beds, do stuff like that. Make sure that they have firewood during the winters and stuff like that. So this piece was an elm bowl that I did a rectangular piece out of. Let it warp. You can see that it's quite a bit longer in this direction than this direction. Then the colors represent the same colors in that wheel, and I used the aluminum armature wire to keep the the rigidity of the piece. But that's I think that's about all I have.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, well, we want to thank Dave for his wonderful presentation. He's here if you want to come up and bug him with some more questions or see if he'll give you some of his stuff. Can I have that? I'm joking. So I want to thank you all for coming. One thing that was when Dave mentioned he'd won that award at the festival, I didn't get posted, but Ron Campbell won 2 awards at festival, 3 awards. Dave won 1, and I think Daryl DeRuyter won. Did I see that he was a winner? I did see that, yeah. I think I saw that he also won an award with the festival. That has got to be a record. Yeah, we never. I mean, lucky we're lucky if one woodturner wins an award. To have Ron win 3, Dave win 1, and Daryl DeRuyter, we had 5 awards from our group at festival. That was unheard of. That was a great year. So we want to give those guys all a big hand for promoting our field. We want to thank everybody for attending, and especially online and here in person. Any questions online, Bruce?
I don't have any questions. I don't see anybody putting their hand up.
Okay. All right, then we want to thank everybody for coming out. We'll see you all next month. Thank you very much. Yeah, grab a chair.